Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of My Faith with Homer and Pip. We have our producer, Brent Young in Atlanta. Steve, the Homer True with the Holy Spirit, came up with this idea. I'm Tommy Pippins. Homer.
Always start with Mother Teresa. I have a Mother Teresa t-shirt that I've worn in the last week. And I think the key to t-shirts is you put the slogan on the back. So you don't have to have a confrontation. And I can't tell you, all it says is, my secret is a very simple one. I pray, and then Mother Teresa. And I don't even have her name spelled right. There's no H in it. Anyway, people come up and say, love the t-shirt. So simplicity must be the key because it's in big letters, but it's not very long. And that's what she always said when people asked her secret.
And thanks to you, I have the privilege of wearing it and never noticed the misspelling. You know, I had the blessing of about 10 days ago or so, through a friend, and three of us sat together and had coffee, of seeing Jesus. I looked into this amazing woman's smile and her eyes, and I saw the Lord, born of unspeakable challenges, pain. But here she is today to share a story, no matter what you're doing. And I say this with great humility because God has brought us so many marvelous guests. Please listen to what Diane Nienas has to say. Diane, thanks again. It is a pleasure. And as always, we kick it off with Steve the Homer True. And as he points out, no rules, no time limits. Take us where you want us to go.
I love that. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
It's, as I like to say now, and I've learned, your spiritual resume. And my curiosity always starts with, where do you want to start? When you start your story of my faith, when, how, at what age, whatever, do you want to begin?
Well, I think it's always nice to kind of start at the beginning, right? I actually had a beautiful childhood. I was one of 15 children growing up on a farm. And I feel like that experience just brought such a grounding into my life. It made me have an appreciation for the land and all of God's creation that surrounded us. And that all stemmed from my dad and the way that he loved growing up on the farm. My mom and dad were also high school sweethearts, just like myself with my husband, Tony. And so I feel like the love story was one that I was able to mirror in so many different ways. And that beginning wasn't the only thing that I shared with my parents. They also had to watch and suffer the loss of two of their children. And my husband and I also experienced that. We lost two of our four sons. During this heartache, it actually opened my eyes to the beauty that God has for us. And I really grew to see that pain does have a purpose through all of it. And I feel like I would just love to be able to share how that pain turned into a beautiful story from the things that I was able to witness in my life. Like I said, my husband and I were high school sweethearts, and we didn't do things the traditional way. We started our family really young, and I would have thought that being a teen mom would have been one of those areas that would have been one of my greatest challenges in life. However, I couldn't see the mountain that was going to be coming in the distance and the other things that we were going to have to climb together. My two boys, Matthew and Trent, were just such a joy. We were young parents trying to figure it all out. And just when things started to get kind of comfortable, my husband asked if we could expand on our family. It took him about a year to convince me. And then we decided that we were going to see what God was going to bring for us. And wow, God really delivered. I had my son Leo was born about 10 and a half years after our Trent. And so there was a pretty big age span in between and my older boys and the younger boys, which is a big challenge in its own. Just having the balance of trying to figure out how you go on family outings when you have teenage boys and you have toddlers. And shortly after Leo was born, our youngest son, Oliver, came into our family as well. It wasn't long after that this new happy beginning took us on a journey that we couldn't have foreseen. Shortly after Leo turned 2, his body started to fail him. And what had happened initially was Leo started tripping. So we thought that he maybe sprained his ankle. And after taking him to the doctor to have him checked out, the doctor had told us that we needed to go down to Children's Hospital and have him have a CT scan of his brain. The whole time I was driving, I couldn't grasp about why we were going to have a CT of his brain done, when in my mind I was thinking he had a sprained ankle. And things just escalated so quickly upon that arrival. Leo had a team of doctors that were working with him, and the CT scan led to an MRI, which led to a spinal tap and all this blood work. And after a week's stay in the hospital, and Leo's files were sent all over the world, it came back to us showing that Leo was one of 5 in the world that were demonstrating the effects that his brain was showing. In that time period, we went from this happy toddler to a lifeless little boy who could only blink his eyes for communication. And in that, all I could see was fear in his blinking, in his unknown of what was happening and what was stripped away from him. The doctors had prepared us for the worst. They told us that Leo most likely wouldn't see his 3rd birthday. And the way things were looking, they couldn't have been more, accurate with what we were seeing. And then we took a leap of faith, and we decided to try to seek out a more natural form of healing. And we started working with a couple of different holistic doctors. One was a nutritionist and one was a biomechanical doctor who was a former ER and medical practicing physician who started to have like a call that he felt that he could treat people, more through channeling God and what God would be able to provide for healing hands through him. And in the course of months, we went from Leo being a toddler who had been stripped of so much of his life, his ability to speak, his motor functions. And between the nutritionist and the biomechanical healer, we started to see Leo come back to us. And we were able to regain his ability to eat, and he got up to being able to use a walker. And all of this happened in about a 9-month time period. And as we approached his 3rd birthday, a day that they told us we wouldn't see, it was such a celebration to see what Leo had overcome, but we weren't out of the woods yet. Leo just was this beautiful little boy. You could see that fear had kind of shifted. And I was sitting next to him one day, and I could catch him looking over my shoulder. I looked over to see what I could, if I could get a glimpse of what he was seeing. And I looked back at him and I asked him, "What are you looking at, Leo?" And he said, "I see Jesus." Well, my reaction wasn't what you would maybe expect from a mom. I said, "Well, don't go by him." I was in such a state of fear, and I wasn't, at a point where I was wanting to let go. And when my husband came home and I shared with him what had happened, he said, "Well, why didn't you ask any questions?" And he said, "Well, next time, ask some questions." And I'm like, "Next time? There's not going to be a next time." At this moment in Leo's journey, I might for sure was in a state of fear, and I hadn't had that moment of surrender. But Leo, he brought Jesus to our heart again. And months later, I was tucking him in up in bed, and I said to him, I was tucking Oliver in and I was tucking Leo in, and I caught Leo again looking over my shoulder, and I looked at him and trying to see what he was focusing in on, and he was looking at the spot on the wall, and I asked him, "What are you looking at, Leo?" And again he said, "I see Jesus." This time I had my husband's voice in my head, and so I asked him some questions, and I asked him, "What does he look like?" And at this time, Leo's vocabulary was still extremely limited. And so it took him a while to get some of these words out. But what he described was he has long, dark hair, blue eyes, and he is wearing white, and he's bright. And the whole time Leo was telling me this description, he never took his eyes off of the spot he was looking. He was describing to me truly what he was seeing before him. And that was the beginning of, I would say, my surrender moment, my acceptance to see that God had a plan, and that if I laid all of my burden down at the foot of the cross, that I was going to possibly be taken on the most beautiful journey. And Leo's visions started to go from these things that he was seeing to a relationship with Jesus. As time was passing by, Leo started to have these conversations, and sometimes he would share what Jesus was replying to him, and sometimes he would have this conversation where you could only hear one side. But Leo prepared my heart in such a big way for what my family was about to endure. And in the course of 7 years, I lost 8 family members that were close to my heart, including my mom and dad, and my aunt and uncle, who were honestly like another mom and dad figure to us. And we also had suffered the loss of my brother, and another loss that I could not have foreseen when I was preparing for all of this with Leo was the loss of another son. And Leo was so instrumental in the way that God used him through all of these different losses that we were being presented with in our family. And they truly were just like a snowball. They just rolled one after another. My brother was diagnosed, and then my dad was diagnosed, and it just kept rolling. And when one would pass away, another was diagnosed, and there's no way that I could have endured the significant loss that I had without what Leo had shown and taught me over what he calls training with Jesus.
So this was
Oh, I'm
with
sorry.
Leo. How long did this continue? I'm assuming years. So it started when he was 3.
Yes, it started when he was 3, and initially it started with these 2 kind of sightings that he was talking, these visions that he was seeing, and then a lot of time actually passed by. There wasn't a lot spoken about for like a year, and then there started to be these conversations that like Leo was seeing some things and foretelling us some things that our family didn't even know about yet. And there was one particular time that we were driving in the car. My husband and I were in the front seat, and Leo and my youngest son, Oliver, were in the back. And Leo started talking about my sister, Patty. And I said to him, I'm like, honey, you don't know Aunt Patty. Aunt Patty died before you were born. I said, maybe you're thinking of one of your other aunts. So keeping in mind that I'm one of 15 and I have 9 sisters, I thought maybe Leo was just getting, her confused with somebody. But the reality of it was Leo's never seen a picture of Patty, nor did he ever really hear me speak about Patty. And he started to describe her. And he was so accurate with what he was describing. he got a little like almost frustrated with me in the back seat saying, I do know Patty. And the way he was bringing description forth to me, it was pretty obvious that he did know who Patty was.
So I want to get back to that, but I'm curious from the beginning, what other people unfortunately have had terrible things, probably not as many as yours, but how was God a part of it from the beginning? Was that something from your parents? Because it doesn't have to be a part of the story. And in fact, in some cases, then when it is, people lose their faith. But just from the beginning,
Yes.
it seems that God was always a part of everything. How did that start for you?
For me, I was actually brought up in a family. We were Catholic. We would attend church, and I went through all of the sacraments. And however, I just felt like during that time, I was kind of going through the motions. I felt like I was doing things because it was what my parents had kind of wanted for me. And I wasn't really in a relationship with Jesus. I knew of him, but I didn't know him. It wasn't something that we spoke of in our home. When Tony and I created our own family, it wasn't something that we spoke of. And so Leo wasn't hearing from me or from Tony conversations about God or Jesus. And his limitations for his health kept him from being able to go to the typical things. Like he did make his first communion and he made his first reconciliation, but his ability to attend those classes was really limited and often distracted by the pain that his body was feeling. So when Leo was actually talking about the things that he was seeing, it was so clear that this was a supernatural occurrence that was happening, that he was in this realm of relation with Jesus and seeing things that some of us are maybe too busy or distracted to actually take time to see.
When did it happen for you with your faith where, yes, I believe this and this is why?
Yes. For me personally, it was in that moment. So when Leo saw Jesus the second time, and it was so undeniable. So that was about when I was 33. And for me, that was the transferring time of going from having this awareness of God to truly trusting God, knowing God, believing that God is with me, he's for me, and that he was going to take me on the path that I was going to be enduring in the years to come. And so for me, even though it was something that I was born and raised into this Catholic community, and I still attend Catholic church now and love the community that I belong to, it was these impactful things that I saw in my home that truly elevated me to the belief that I have now.
I don't know that I've asked this question before. This seems similar. I can't remember the movie or the book that was written, but I always wondered, if I were you, do I tell people? Is anybody going to believe me? There's so many parts of it. What was that process, and probably still is today, about to handle or feel comfortable with all those things in any way?
It's so true. I know initially when things started to happen, my husband Tony had a little bit more reservations about telling people because of exactly what you're saying. Will people believe? But the more that we were starting to see events occur here in our home, the more undeniable it came, like clear that we needed to share, because in my perspective, it was honestly doing a disservice to God to not let people know what we were witnessing. Initially you want to kind of, protect yourself from what other people might think or say. And, it just became so clear that this was something that was going to be meant to help others. And having witnessed and seen so many people around me go through trials and suffering, the amount of comfort that I started to see as I opened up about things that were happening, and then the beauty of other people witnessing what was happening with Leo, or actually hearing what he was expressing. Because with Leo, there was this physical transformation that actually occurred in these moments with Jesus. So Leo's body was typically really held rigid. His contracting muscles were often fighting one another. So he held himself in a very tight position. And that also occurred like in his facial expressions as well. His lips were pulled a little bit more like tight. But when these time frames would come with his conversations with Jesus, there was this beautiful softening that occurred across Leo's whole body. And it was this beautiful glow, and any imperfections, especially like in his teenage years, any of those imperfections, they were washed away. And like his lips were able to soften and pucker. And the beautiful thing was, like I explained, Leo's vocabulary was a little bit limited and challenged. But these moments when he actually spoke about Jesus, his words flowed, and he was able to relay these messages. That was such a key for me to know, okay, if someone who typically has a difficult time speaking is now flowing the love of God from their mouth, this is not meant for just me. This is meant to be shared and to bring hope for people, because I just feel like our testimonies, our stories are what people can relate to. The Bible is full of all these beautiful, miraculous moments. And sometimes I think people can think, well, that was so long ago. But when you can make these stories relevant and people can see that they're happening now and that the miracles are still present today, then I feel like people can't deny what's happening around them.
I will defer to Tommy, but what's the timetable? I don't know, just so people, what year it was when Leo was what, 3, and then where we are today, or where you are today.
So Leo would have been 21 now, and he passed away at age 16. And so we were covering a course of from 3 to age 16 is the lifespan of Leo's visions and conversations and training with Jesus.
Tommy, you take it from here.
Well, you could write a book about Diane Nienas' story. As a matter of fact, she has. So, Diane, would you please hold that up and explain the significance of the 3-word title?
So, I See Jesus, 3 words that changed my life, it was released last October, and it all stemmed from what Leo expressed. It's funny because I actually battled for a period of time trying to figure out what to call my book. And it was one of those moments where I was wrestling with all of these ways to kind of like almost hide the message of the story in the title. It was advised to me, to maybe not put Jesus on the cover of the book because it might turn some people away. And for a brief moment, I listened to that advice. And then I realized, how can it be anything but Jesus? He was the reason why the story came to be. He is the center of everything that has transpired in my life. So how could it not be, I see Jesus? Those words that Leo spoke to me, they did change my life.
Because everything's in the book, I'm assuming there are no limits. And because I've had the privilege of getting into the book, I want to share that with Homer and Brent and everybody else, because everybody needs to know about your story. You grew up the 14th of 15. There was a time when you were, as you say, violated.
Mm-hmm.
You had a voice, you didn't have a voice, acted out, a gut-wrenching decision involving you and Tony. If you would please explain that only as a lead-in to this remarkable faith story, Diane, through your incredible son,
Yes.
Leo.
Like Tom mentioned, I was number 14 of 15 children, and sometimes in that order of a family, you can get kind of lost in the shuffle. Yet my parents did such an incredible job of trying to make sure that we all felt loved. Unfortunately, in my upbringing, there was a period of time that I was abused, and not physically abused, but sexually abused. And I don't want, like, my focus was never to shift like a blame on to anybody else. But I have to see now that that aspect of my life was very instrumental in some of the choices that I continued with, moving forward. And it's just like all these things when I was mentioning before that I was brought up Catholic and I had that in my heart. God wasn't leading my life. And it's such a clear visual in my timeline to see where God came, because the things before would show that he really wasn't present in the sense of me allowing him to be present. That incident, I think, kind of made me not have a lot of value in my own self-worth, and I wasn't really sure about how to look at myself and have that voice, which I think was stripped away from such a young age. And it, you know, it was part of what I think of a future decision when Tony and I were high school sweethearts, like I mentioned, and we discovered that I was pregnant. And in that moment, there was such desperation, and we didn't see how it was possible to be able to raise a child at such a young age in high school. And I made a choice to end that pregnancy, which is something that had truly weighed on me for a long period of time. That decision, I know, haunted me because it led me then to attempt to take my own life. And I look back at that time period now, and I can clearly see that had I just invited God into my heart and it allowed him to guide the path that was going to be before me, I perhaps would have made a different decision. It's a decision that I have been able to lay at the cross and allow God to take that shame away from me. And what I've seen by being so open and transparent in the story of I See Jesus is that it's allowing others that have held shame and have held things that they didn't feel like they could move past, or that God would love them beyond what their choices were. It's brought them freedom. It's brought them the same kind of thing that I've been able to let go to God too. And so being able to be open and share those decisions that you're not always proud about that you make, is another big reason about why we need to share stories, because it could truly be a pivotal part in someone else's healing. And, seeing where I was and where I am now, it all changed. Like, I feel like there's this Diane that was before Leo in my life and the Diane that I am now. And that all is coming because God used Leo as a beautiful instrument and was able to soften my heart and to see that I do have worth and I do have a purpose to fulfill. And I found my voice, and my voice wants to shout, God's glory, because it is through him that my story has transformed so much.
It's beautiful, and I pray that anyone who knows someone perhaps has gone through abortion would understand that releasing of that pain, shame, whatever you might want to say, at the cross, forgiving self, which you've obviously done in the Lord, and having peace. I would like, please, if you would, the focus on Leo is richly deserved. He's God's angel. He's with us now. every time I, look at you here, you see him. Your son, Trent, as you say, you're so focused on Leo. And then if you'll please talk about Trent and his own journey to see Jesus.
Yes. It's incredible to me that I felt like I knew I was going to be enduring a loss of a son, but I felt so blindsided to find out that the loss of another child was going to be something I was going to have to walk through. And Trent, at the time of his diagnosis, was a 26-year-old man and on his own, and he was, in incredible health. He was so physically fit and, really cautious about nutrition. And he was reffing ice hockey at a college level, and his dream was to ultimately become an NHL ref. And his determination and his, connections were definitely leading towards that path. So when his life changed this instant where I felt like I was on replay of watching what I thought was Leo in this sprained ankle turning into a terminal illness. With Trent, we thought that he had a concussion. He was in an accident, and about a week later, he was reffing a game and ended up falling on the ice. And the trainer had, thought that he had a concussion and asked him to leave the game. Well, things just escalated so quickly. And within a week's time after that, we found ourselves at the ER and having a CT scan of his brain. And it's like this out of body moment where you're hearing all these things being told to you and everything's moving so quickly, and you're trying to play catch up to what's being said to you. And they ended up saying we need to transport Trent to a different facility, and we need to have an emergency procedure done. We found a mass on his brain, and I'm following this ambulance, and I'm just like, everything's replaying in my mind. And we get down to the other hospital, and it's discovered after multiple surgeries that Trent had glioblastoma multiforme. And it was incredible to witness what I saw in Trent. Although he had this moment where the tears flowed and he saw all of his dreams be taken away in a quick moments of time, being told that he would never skate again, that he would never lift weights again, everything that he was passionate about, they were telling him he would not do. And it wasn't long after that we had to bring Trent back home and monitor him after his surgeries. And what I started to witness in this time was just this beautiful transformation. Trent was a student at Catholic Memorial High School, and then he went away to college and studied biology. And in that time period, he actually drifted away from his faith. And when we brought him back home and he started to spend time beside Leo, I started to see him come back to his faith. And he asked Leo one day, "How do I believe?" So Trent was in this moment of everything about what he thought was going to be in his future was now gone. And he's told he has 15 to 18 months to live. And he's asking Leo, "How do I believe?" And Leo says to him, "I am a disciple of Jesus. I have a special soul in my body, and that is how I talk to him." And Leo just expressed this with such confidence. And it was such an impactful moment in Trent's life that he took what he heard from his brother and what he had been witnessing from things that were occurring, and he was able to take that and apply it to his own steps that he was going to walk on his own journey. And from that moment on, Trent knew that he too could use what was occurring with him for a bigger purpose. And he would go to chemo treatments and go to the gym right after. So his network of buddies and people that were in the community were witnessing what he was suffering, and yet he was still there persevering through all of it, which ended up giving them motivation to be, better for themselves and to use each day to the fullest. And Trent's faith just continued to just grow and grow and grow. But what was so incredible about this whole part with Trent as well is that while I was at the ER with Trent getting the CT scan, Leo was at home with my husband Tony, and Leo told Tony in that moment that Trent had a tumor and that Jesus was getting ready for Trent's soul. And so Leo actually had told us about the diagnosis before we actually even knew what was being told from the doctors. And it's just another beautiful example of how God was present and these miracles of the things that were happening to continue to prepare us for what was going to be ahead of us. And Trent took all of that strength, all that outer body strength that he had, and he channeled it into a strength of faith. And it just grew and grew. And he spent time in the Word, and he just found his love of Jesus, and nothing was shaking him after that point. And I feel like, again, all of these things were occurring from what was being witnessed at home. The faith was just continuing to build because these events were undeniable of what was happening around us. And Trent was just another beautiful example of, if you can trust in God's plan and see that it can possibly be used for something greater than what we're experiencing here and now, it will change your life.
I sense such peace, but yet you're human. Weren't there times, Diane, where you were just so angry with God and asked why, what are you doing, on a purely human level?
I feel like there was something very supernatural that God protected me early on. And like Leo's acceptance gave me acceptance. And even, even with Trent, he had that little brief moment of anger, like asking that question, why is this happening to me? But he was able to release that as well. Leo never asked why. And I honestly can't remember a time where I asked really why. And it's not because I feel like I didn't have the pain and the sorrow that comes with all of this. It is something that I honestly feel like God bubble wrapped my heart. And he just knew there was going to be something bigger than the moment that I was in now. And to be able to truly show the love that he has to offer us, I think is what is weaved into this whole story, that he is the center. And because he's the center, I am able to push through. And the anger is not it. I think that because if the ultimate goal for us is to have an eternity of life with God, then where does that pain truly come from when you know that your loved ones are with God? Because I know for me, Leo saw Jesus. Leo described it. Leo gave me descriptions of all those loved ones that had lost about their time in heaven. He showed me what their angel wing colors were. And I think that sometimes the ability to let go of a loved one, or maybe not let go of a loved one, stems from what you know of what they believed. And because I know Leo believed in Jesus, and I know that actually Trent, on his final day, revealed to me one of the most beautiful gifts I've ever had as a mother, where he was looking at me and he says to me, "I see a light." And he then said, "I see Leo." And then he shifted his eyes a little bit more to the side and said, "I see Jesus." So that title of "I see Jesus" not only came from one son, it came from two sons. And I feel like for Trent to be able to see not only Leo, but Jesus beside him, brought me such complete peace, because I know they're with their Heavenly Father. And the way he described like my dad as well and my brother, I know that they are with God. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have sorrow and pain and tears. I mean, heck, I was crying all morning this morning, because it just was weighing on me about sharing the story is something that I'm obviously really passionate about. But, as you talk about it, it's reliving a lot of moments that were hard to get through. And for me, I think that a lot of it was like a survivor mode, and you're pushing through and you're pushing through. And then, then you have that moment where you exhale and you kind of look back. And as I looked through the completed like manuscript of "I See Jesus," it was like this reality of like, wow, I lived through all of this. If I can live through all of this, what amazing things can still be accomplished, because all of that pain has turned into my strength. And that's all stemming from my belief in God.
And thank you so much for sharing it, because you're doing it for the glory of God. You honor your sons in heaven and the rest of your family. I'm not a big C.S. Lewis guy, Diane, but for some reason, this came to me as we were getting ready for our get together here on My Faith with Homer and Pip. I believe the book has to do with pain, where he says that God whispers in our pleasure, he speaks in our conscience, but he shouts in our pain.
Mm.
It is his megaphone to rouse a world that is lost. I'm paraphrasing that part. A deaf world is what he said.
Mm.
It plants the flag of truth in the fortress of the rebel soul. Can you relate to that?
Yes, and I would have to say at a certain point, maybe God could have put his megaphone down. I mean, we were talking a lot of pain. I can definitely relate to that. I know that my biggest growth was through my hardest trials. And sometimes I think when, we can get into that like coasting through life moment, we don't always maybe stop to reflect about the simplicity of things that are around us. And I think what had happened during these huge moments that our family was enduring was I was actually forced to become still. And, when Leo was bedbound for so many years, I was by his side. And it kind of removed me from all the aspects of the world that were around us, and just really let me be present in the moment and start to take in what really is important in life. And there was, great movement in me spiritually during my moments of stillness. And for that, I feel like it only could have come from, what I endured.
All right, Homer.
Well, my first thought was like when it happens to Trent, I'm going, God, come on. Like, wasn't enough. But I sensed by then that Leo was the answer. You go, all right, Leo. And I think everybody wants to believe there's a heaven, but there's Now, for you, once you believe Leo, it's over. Like you're
Yes.
in. It's
Yes.
Tommy said this, but you can feel God when you hear you talk because it's so easy, and it can't be easy given what you've occurred. But when you believe Leo, then it's easy, right?
Yes.
And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if anybody else believes. You know, some people aren't going to believe. You know, it's just so hard, and even that's easy because you're in. You and I start thinking, come on, God, give me a Leo. I don't want to experience what they, but heck, I'd have a strong faith too if I had Leo. So take that any and any.
And I feel like that is such a big part of what I want to do in sharing the message is to give everybody that Leo, because I know Leo wasn't meant just for me. I know that this is one of those moments where when you think back to like the disciples walking alongside Jesus and they're seeing and witnessing all these incredible miracles, and yet they still were like, really? Anytime that they had these struggles, they would still kind of doubt some things. And, as readers of the Bible, we're often thinking, how can they not believe, or how are they questioning? They just watched all this stuff happen. And so for me, when I put it into my own life and my own story, I think about it the same way, the way that God and Jesus worked their beautiful works through Leo. I'm witnessing this. How can I not believe? I mean, there's just no doubt, because like I said, Leo didn't have the influence of the outside world. This is something that came directly from heaven. And I just feel like it is incredible, the things that we watched and saw. And I just want to be able to share it because, especially right now when so many people are kind of in this dark state and the time where there's so much doubt, and they're often asking, where are you, God, in all of this? He's here. He's knocking. You just have to open the door and listen and see. And, I still see even now on a really regular basis, the presence of both my boys through the signs that, have appeared through the grace of God. And I come across all these beautiful things that just make me smile and say, I know that was you. And those are things about having an open heart and an open mind, and tying back to, if you have eyes that will see and ears that will hear. And that is what I want. I want to be open to all that he has to give us.
This is maybe a question of your faith, but again, it gets back to Leo. So the first time he said it, did you believe it? Or was there a time that you remember where you smiled and went, this is real? This is true. This is, I mean, at some point at the beginning, you have to wonder. I don't know that process. I'm curious to know what the process was for you, because I assume you'll never forget that moment when you went, oh my God, this is it. This is whatever the word you use.
Well, I definitely know, like I said, that first initial comment was my, my mindset was still very much in a state of fear. I mean, Leo's health was so shaky that I truly thought that Jesus was there to take him. So in that moment, I'm not sure what I was really feeling, because fear had such a hold of my mindset. But there were some things that happened in Leo's journey that are truly incredible. And part of that would stem from this connection that Leo had with my brother Glenn and my dad. And both of these stories are so impactful in God's presence that it's an amazing thing that I witnessed. When my brother was diagnosed with cancer, he ended up getting an infection in his port, and he ended up collapsing in the shower at home. And my sister-in-law was a registered nurse, and she was able to get him up to the bed and call 911, and they took him to the hospital, and they ran all these tests, and it was discovered that he had sepsis in his system. and they put him on some antibiotics and, and hoped that things would be okay. And while all this was transpiring, I didn't know that this was happening. Leo and I were at home getting ready for bed. And Leo said to me, I have a secret. And he said, I'm an angel. And I have a special job to do tonight. I have to hover over Uncle Glenn and help heal him. So the next morning, after my brother had gotten back home from the hospital, he woke in the morning, and my sister-in-law described this as like a giddy little kid that couldn't wait to call me. And when he finally did call me, he said, "You'll never believe the vision that I just had." And he told me the whole story about ending up at the hospital. And he said, while I was sleeping, Leo came to me in the form of a hummingbird, and he hovered over me. He said everything was that of a hummingbird except its face was Leo's. And my brother's port was healed. And that ability for God to allow Leo to move in the spirit and to actually be an instrument and intercede in something like that, and for us to, neither one of us, to know the conversation that was being held or the events that were taking place, and to have that all come together, that event put my brother Glenn in such a beautiful mind space that he had no doubt about where he was going, and he had such peace about what was occurring in his life, and he completely surrendered to God, knowing this is what's happening. These are the things that are occurring in life that we don't always see. And I mean, Leo had moments like this that occurred with so many people, and it's something that's just so undeniable about the way God was using him.
Sorry, Diane, I have to say, I think I speak for some people who go, come on, Diane, this never ends. It just keeps growing and growing. This is out of control, which you've lived with and you'll live with for the rest of your life, and you'll have the same look you have right now. Fine.
I mean, I don't even know what the purpose would be in not being, forthcoming with what I occurred. There's nothing for me to gain personally from sharing these stories. What is to gain is saving people and saving them from a path that they're maybe on, and bringing them to Christ. And I feel like our greatest ability and our greatest gift that we can take with us when we leave is to be able to look at someone in heaven and have them say to us, I'm here because of you. And I know that for Leo, there are people that are going to come and say, I'm here because you showed me Christ. You were able to bring me to Jesus. And he just beamed. I mean, there was, any time, like even when my dad was on his final days, we went over and we saw him. And, Leo was asking him, are you ready, Grandpa? And my dad was like, not just yet. And Leo is like, it's okay, Grandpa. Jesus is with you. And he's just smiling. So here's someone who's days away from, taking in their last breath here on earth. And Leo's beaming, like he knows, he saw what heaven is and what is waiting for us. And when you saw that joy in his face, I think it just brought a tremendous amount of peace and calmness to people. And I just can't wait to continue to share and bring that hope to as many people as I can.
Tommy, I'll let you finish, but my last words are Leo, Leo, Leo. Diane, I'm not going to remember your name, but whenever I see your face, all I'm going to think is Leo, Leo, Leo.
I love that.
Diane, please tell us about the book, where it's available. There are a couple of kiddos books, and by the way, St. Leo is a big part of those, if you'll talk about them.
Yes.
And also your website just launched as we speak on this day in late July.
Yes, I am so excited about the new website. When everything was coming together so quickly, my son Matthew actually, along with his wife, put together a website for us based on just some, they didn't have really like the experience in the background, but they created this amazing website. Well, as things have kind of come together and a year has passed, I knew it was time to kind of make it a little bit more professional and a little bit more friendly for the users to navigate through. And so it did just launch underneath my name, and I am so glad that it's out there because I hope it's an incredible tool to bring awareness to the different services that can be found throughout there. And to just keep focusing that whole attention back on what God can do in our lives. So on the website, it's broken up really beautifully, showing the ability to have me come in and be a speaker at different events. I've had the pleasure of going into many elementary schools with the children's book series that I wrote as well, called Living Life with Leo. And I took Leo's adventures that we made possible for him, and I broke it into seasons. So there will be one for every season. Right now, autumn and spring are both out, and winter is actually releasing this November. And then summer will release in April next year. And the books highlight how someone in a wheelchair is still capable and able to do a lot of adventures that young kids love doing. It just shows like this beautiful story of how, to accept people's differences and see that, amongst those differences, we actually are more alike than different. And it's just really beautiful to see how the kids have taken to it. There's a hidden cardinal on each of the pages. And so it makes it a really interactive experience in the elementary schools. And that's been a great pleasure to bring that little bit that feels like Leo's still making friends, which I love. And the site also showcases the different books that are available, and they're all through Amazon. And I also am a grief coach and allowing those services for a lot of the things that I've endured in my life to help guide others through the pain or obstacles that they're maybe facing, and be able to just kind of walk them through. I like to call it shepherding others through their sorrow. Just be able to show them that, with God at the center, we can and we will get through things. And we definitely need to lean on one another. I mean, so much of progress through our grief for sure comes from the support of others that surround us.
And the book, there's information on the website as to where to get the book, or do you want to share that now?
Yes.
Today?
So
Okay.
the books, like I said, the books are all available on Amazon. There's a couple of local bookstores that are also highlighted on the website for those that live in Wisconsin and Iowa. And but otherwise, yes, you can access all the books through Amazon.
It's not surprising as I close to see in your book, I believe Philippians is what you referenced to, for me to live as Christ and to die as gain.
Yes.
I'll just let you take us out on that note, please.
Being able to truly let go of myself and to start to live for God was probably one of the most beautiful moments in my life, to actually lay it all down for him and to know that this journey and this walk that we're doing in life isn't about us. It's about him. It's about bringing others to him, about bringing glory to him, and along the way trying to just bring healing and hope for anybody that we might cross paths with. And I definitely saw in all of my loved ones that I lost that they came to this piece where to die was to gain, because they knew they were gaining eternal life with God.
And I know you feel their presence, Diane, as you go forward a day at a moment at a time by the grace of God. I can't wait for the reunion in heaven. I hope I have a seat for it, because it's going to be very, very special. Thank you so much for sharing everything, and what a gift. And as Homer has said, we hope and pray that in doing that, even though you've done a lot of it on different venues and will continue to give glory to God, that it might continue to heal your heart. So we're just so privileged. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Our special guest has been Diane Nienas on My Faith with Homer and Pip. Homer and the Holy Spirit had this idea, which we hope and pray will help you in your journey to and through the cross of Christ. We can do all things in Christ who gives us strength. And Diane has pointed that out still again for us today. For our producer, Brent Young, and Homer, I'm Tommy Pickens. Thank you. What you got? Leo. Thanks again. God bless everybody. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.